Welcome to the next part of this week's Hot Rod episode. This part will be creating some more low poly meshes, and we're going to start off by creating some low poly meshes for the interior. You've seen me create this detailed steering wheel, and now we're going to create a low poly for that. This is one of the tougher objects to create a low poly for because of those thin wire spokes you have in the wheel. We're probably going to solve that in a non-modeled way. But first off, what I'm going to do is just remove edges here. This is most of the time the easiest way to create the low poly out of the high poly. Just select edges, perform a loop selection on them, and remove them through Control Backspace. Why Control Backspace? If you use regular backspace, you won't remove the vertices in between. And that will effectively mess up your mesh pretty badly. So I'm just going to do that same thing all over. It's a little bit of a boring job, but it's the quickest way to do it. Just to start from scratch, it's going to take a whole lot more work. There's also a shortcut for Alt Loop, in case you didn't know it yet. You really should, but it's Alt L, and ring selection is Alt R, which I used just here. And what I'm doing here is I'm trying to rotate this part so that I can get a better silhouette on that, because the square shape, I don't think that's going to work. It's not going to hold up in my low poly, but it turns out it's a little bit tricky to rotate, so I'm gonna have to I'm probably gonna have to leave it like that. Well, next up, what I'm going to try is create the low poly for the spokes here, the spokes in the steering wheel. And I'm not going to model those, I'm just going to use an opacity map for that. So there will effectively just be planes, and there will be an opacity map on them, as well as a normal map, which will create a pretty convincing illusion that we have these spokes for the steering wheel. A little bit tricky to align, but should work out. And so yeah, of course, what I can do now is I attach them and rotate those three into position, of course with angle snapping. There we go. Then I select all these parts and delete the model spokes. There we go. That looks pretty much like our model steering wheel. Yeah, and I'm just going to delete that too, because it turns out it's impossible to twist it, and I'm going to create another one. Align it to the center. Turn on local coordinates, move it into position. Then turn on the high poly, and now I have to match it as close as possible. I'm going to put it on 5 sides because 4 is square, but 5 really gets a pretty good illusion of roundness in there. And still some tweaking to get that into the correct position. And there we go, something like that should be fine. Reduce the number of segments a little bit. Especially when you're working with round parts, it's easy to get lost in the number of segments. It goes up so fast, I have to pay attention to that. Okay, I think this looks about right. I can attach that, and these will probably need to be moved a little bit to scale them a little bit. Might give some problems for baking, but I'll see that when I get there. It won't be so hard to fix. Okay, I think I only need to fix a little bit of the smoothing groups. Yeah, that looks okay. Alright, now the steering column. I'm just gonna make this one straight shaft and not really pay attention to the geometrical detail. Normal maps will just do that. Like I said, you probably won't see so much of this part. That way I can get away with a lot less detail. Those bolts can be removed. These loops are not necessary. There we go. Alt loop, Control Backspace. Quickest way to get rid of them. Same here. Alt L, Control Backspace, and it was a little bit harder to get them removed there because at the center, as you can see here, Max has a little bit of trouble removing those because those are not regular poles. There's 3 edges coming together there, and it doesn't really work that way. Alright, this part can be deleted as well. Same there, we don't need that. Alright, we've simplified this a lot. Turn on auto smooth. Auto smooth most of the time does a decent job, especially on simpler objects. It can do a decent job preparing your smoothing groups in a way that is usable for normal maps. When you've got more complex parts like the body or something, or the engine, then you're gonna have to do it manually. So anyway, what's up next here is I'm gonna work on these gauges, and yeah, I'm going to delete a few of them because obviously I don't want to waste too much UV space on these. The chrome borders of the gauges will be unwrapped, and then each gauge will use the same shared unwrapping. So I'll just unwrap one, and then once it's unwrapped I will duplicate it. And of course the center, this polygon I have selected here, that one will have unique UV mapping. You'll see that later. It's just the smartest way to approach this. I've done it before and it's easy, it works. So one thing I haven't done in the interior yet, and we're going to go back to the high poly a little bit here. I mix things up a little bit just because I like to move forward, is I don't have a shifter yet in the car. Yeah, I need to turn on the correct default layer. There is no gear shift lever in the car yet, and what I'm going to do now is create that. It's a sort of cone shape that's simply that's the leather cover that covers it, and it rises up out of the floor. It's a lot simpler than modern cars, luckily, because that can be a lot more work to create the entire center console and everything. I'm subdividing it a little bit. Why am I doing that? Because I want to use Max's bait deformation tools to do some very basic sculpting on this thing to make sure the leather looks convincing. Yeah, now I detached that little edge piece. Why did I do that? Because then I can use it to create the actual gear knob from it. Anyway, what I'm doing now is I'm going to do a little bit of sculpting. Basically, all you do is add an edit poly on top of your turbo smooth, and then use the paint deformation tools, which is some very, very rudimentary basic sculpting tools. Really shouldn't imagine too much from them. All I want to do is make this a little bit more interesting. And why am I using this and not ZBrush or Mudbox? Well, simply because it's, even though it's higher quality, the things I'll be able to get from that, it's completely not worth it for me to go to another application, export the OBJ, potentially slow down my 3D Studio Max, because a non-turbo smoothed mesh with the same number of polygons as a turbo smoothed mesh still reacts a lot slower in the viewport. So you can just see me paint some sort of organic detail in there. I'm not going to claim this is this looks any good as a high poly in itself, but it will fit the purpose perfectly. See, if I look back at the reference picture, it was pretty blobby also, since the leather is rather stiff, so this should work. There we go. It's fine with me. And bend this a little bit to the other side. I just want to create an interesting, yeah, point it a little bit towards the driver, collapse that, and do a little bit more of modeling. Looks okay. There we go. And I'm selecting this because I want to use soft selection to sort of contract it around the knob. I'm just using soft selection because I collapsed the turbo smooth on the sculpted leather part. Yeah, there we go. That's our high poly for our gear shift lever. Oh, needs a little. Yeah, now of course what I'm doing now is creating the low poly from it. I'm doing all of that at once. And oh, what do you know? I didn't collapse the turbo smooth. Good thing I kept that, because if I would have collapsed it, then I wouldn't have been able to create the low poly so quickly. And I'm just looking what I can do here. Move that up, and then remove that, just to turn it into a lot simpler mesh. Okay, that looks alright. Yeah, I figured I could try and see if I can do it with less sides, and not at the top, but I can do it at the base. So you see, this is a smart way to reduce the number of polygons without losing your silhouette. And I can do the same thing here, weld every 2 other vertices. And once the normal maps are applied, you'll never be able to tell. Auto smooth that. Even with smoothing group, it's going to be hard to tell. Auto smooth that, and I think I need to put this on the correct layer still. I'm not sure if I did that. I noticed some more detail I can cut. Alright. I have some mechanism parts missing here. The steering column will connect to the steering box beneath the chassis there, so I just need to add a little cylinder there. It would just look strange to me if I left that open. I mean, I don't like skipping details like this. Alright. It's quite a lot done already. So the last thing we need to create the low poly of is the most difficult part so far, and that would be the engine. I've postponed this a little bit because I know it's going to be a very difficult task. Well, difficult. It's going to take a long time. It's going to be tedious, and the rest of the video will involve. Well, the rest of this part of the Hot Rod series will involve creating the engine low poly and other details. Well, let's see. I first have to organize my layers a little bit. It's important to sometimes just track back and fix that up. I had a little bit of problems with my layers, stuff on the wrong layer, etc. Let's see what the problem is here. I need to link parts together. There we go. Oh yeah, I see what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to move up one of them, and I want all of them to come along. Since I figured, looking at the gearbox, it's impossible that my gear shift lever sits away from the gearbox. I mean, it's still a part that has to be connected. I don't have to create the actual connection, but it has to be sort of logically and sit above it. If your gear lever is completely disconnected from your gearbox, you can imagine that would never work. So I just want that to look just like it should. Alright, so this is the mammoth high poly mesh we want to be creating a low poly mesh out of. We're going to start off with the exhausts, since these will probably be the easiest. This mesh is pretty much usable as a low poly already, save for some parts such as these, and I can weld these together. Don't really need that. Yeah, I should triangulate some more parts, since I don't have to watch out for quads now, just because I know I have more control that way. then I can weld these together here. The mesh doesn't need to be so uber clean anymore. And let's see here. Yeah, this can do with some reduction in detail also. Get away with that. Let's see. Okay, now of course I have to reduce all the extra chamfers at the top here. Just select loop, control, backspace, and they're gone. Obviously, if I look at the polygon density here, some of them are just sitting a little bit too tight. But I'm only welding them locally because I don't need that detail at the center of the curve, but I would need it at the outside. It would just look a little bit too sharp. Like that. And let's see here, move these a little bit more to fit the high poly better. I probably won't have to move these so much, but it doesn't hurt to tweak it a little bit more. So these exhausts, the way I designed them, the way I built them up, it was very easy to create the low poly out of. If I would have done this with more segments, then it would have been hard. But from the start on, I considered the number of segments for my high poly control cage and thought about the fact that I might want to reuse them since they're such a tricky part to model. So these are done. I'm going to hide them so they don't bother me anymore. And now we have the big block itself. A little word of explanation here. Because this is such a complex mesh, I do not, and I repeat, I do not want to get caught up in having to unwrap and bake dozens of separate parts for this engine. So for that reason, to save myself work, to save myself headache, to save myself lots of trouble, I want to try and create the engine low poly as much as I can as a single object. So I want to keep everything as much connected and in one piece as I can, because I've had experience with baking this sort of technical stuff. This is actually the most complex one I've done so far, but I've done other ones before, and it's every time again it's obvious to me that if you have lots of intersecting pieces, it just becomes a lot harder to maintain and to bake. So if everything is connected, it might be use a little bit more polygons, might even be a little bit more tricky to unwrap, but your baking process becomes less of a headache. So that's the reason I'm going to try and keep everything in one piece. So what you see me doing here now is obviously I'm not going to use the high poly as a base mesh. That was from the start on not the plan. I want this engine to be the absolute showpiece for the car. I mean, it has to be the best looking part in there. The entire car is pretty much built around the engine, so why not? And that's why I'm putting most effort of all in creating this engine. So yeah, you can just see me doing some simple modeling, and I'm using the existing engine as a guideline. I just want my mesh to fit around it as well as possible. And I'm not going to model all those little ridges in the supercharger. Not worth it. I'm really going to try and keep this low detail because I expect this engine to end up with quite a lot of polygons. I don't know, something about 5,000 for just the engine is very well possible. So if I start modeling every single detail around it, it's going to be more work to unwrap, it's going to be more work to bake, it's going to be more work to texture. So I really want to try and keep this simple. So let's see, I can reuse this edge to create the Carter pan. Same here, just fit that around. Really, I'm not getting lost in fitting too smoothly and snugly around the engine. I'll admit this is a very difficult thing to estimate. You cannot do this if you don't have experience baking normal maps. So I'll try to explain and give you some insight in this so that it should work, but well, you shouldn't expect, if you're doing this for something similar, that you'll get it perfectly right from the first try. It's really a difficult thing. I mean, if you ask me what I find the most difficult thing in 3D, it's preparing and baking for these normal maps. So that's just that for something. So this part at the front, which is modeled separately in the high poly, I will be modeling that as one piece in the low poly mesh. And perform another extrude on that. There we go. Yeah, I just need to fix that up. And basically it's just fitting things snugly around that engine. And you know, zooming is a little bit hard, so I'm using the Z key to get up close. Okay. Yeah, I figured it wasn't working over there, so I'm increasing the number of polygons a little bit again. That should be better. You see, it's really just try and see how you can get it to fit around there without getting too lost in detail. I mean, I can model every single corner over this again. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try and keep it simple, because really you can get away with more with really simple geometry with normal maps, a lot more than you would expect. You just have to make sure you prepare decently for it. So now I have to create this other bulge. You can see me skipping a lot of details, and for the distance you will see this engine at, it's just not worth modeling those. People will never notice if I just skip that little ridge there. Okay, so right now I'm thinking how I should solve these two surfaces, how I should connect them together. Might just leave it at that. It's just a little bit messier, but I don't feel like modeling it. Okay. One thing we completely haven't bothered with yet is are the valve covers on the cylinder heads. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out in the comments, that these are the valve covers instead of the cylinder heads. The cylinder heads are actually below them. So just trying to fit this in. Same thing here, keeping it simple. Moving that up so it fits. Yeah, see, I've foreseen this a little bit with my mesh. Another extrude to fit the top on there. And obviously I'm thinking I don't need these edges here, so I'm just performing a local control backspace on them. Most of the time I don't recommend people performing control backspace on non-loop selections, and if you do, you should, just like me, use target weld to tie up the loose ends you leave behind. Always do that. Never leave this sort of, well, they're like quads with a vert floating somewhere on one of the edges. You should never leave those in your low poly. Always get those fixed. I just make that a personal point to do that. Okay, so another thing I need to model and that I just can't leave at this is are the insets for the bolts on the valve covers. But I'm not going to do those right now. I'm just going to bother with the rear end first. This engine is so complex, so I really have a lot to do here. You probably noticed we're at this for 15 minutes and we really didn't get that far yet, so this engine is going to take a while. Yeah, another thing I need to foresee is the connection for the carburetors on top of the supercharger. I'm preparing those, and then I will just simply extrude these parts. Extrude by local normal, then align them, move these a little bit. There we go. The actual carburetors in low poly, that's for another video. I'm just preparing a little bit for them. Yeah, performing another connect in the center so I can open that up a little bit. This really is a tough part to get right. I mean, I can get so lost in the details, but I absolutely don't want to do that. So I just I'm facing the challenge of creating a mesh that encompasses it as much as I can. That also means solving the puzzle at the surface here. Cap that, connect this. Alright, we're not finished here in the center. I have to do the same thing here for that little extruded part. Cap, weld, move that a little bit. Cap it again. There we go. Okay, now for the center, I'm forming a connect there. I didn't actually need that one connect I did. Well, I might have. Yeah, there we go. I forgot. I deleted what I didn't need it. It's a bit tricky to envision how exactly I'm going to model this. Reason is just I want to model this efficiently. I said the polygon on this engine is probably going to be high anyway, so I need to save as much as I can. And not just because of the poly count, but also because the more polygons you have, the more work it becomes to unwrap. Yeah, move these a little bit. And the same for the carbs at the back. I'm just trying to enclose this. Here's another example of me absolutely trying to model this as one piece. The carburetors in the high poly sit on top of the low poly as a separate object, but I'm not doing that here. I absolutely want them as a single object. Yeah. And because I made sure that my zero axis is that my symmetry axis is on the 0, I can just quickly align verts to that axis. I can do some more welding here, to increase efficiency. You can start to see this mesh is becoming a little bit of a puzzle, but that's expected. That for me, that means I have a mesh that's really optimized for this normal map baking. Here we go. So the carbs will, well, I'll do a bit of them in this video, see how far we get. Another extrude, there we go, just creating the base shape. Wow, what was that? Yeah, there we go. Connect, align, move, select polygons, bridge, and there we go. We have a bridge between the carburetors. Now I need to perform a chamfer on the corners so they're rounded a bit more. I'm just way too square there, would never have worked. And move my edges a little bit so I have them sit more flush with the high poly surface. Just trying to keep this simple. And obviously I need to cut off that top part there. Why did I move that up in the connect and then move it down again? Because then it will be more in a straight line than if I would have placed it there with the connect. So yeah, like that. Just using cut tool to prepare for extruding that part. You can see this is a really difficult part. I mean, it has lots of intersecting little meshes, and I need that to work. Main thing I'm keeping in mind here is I want everything to be one mesh, so that means some quite some extreme optimizing and a lot of puzzling and making sure everything connects. I can delete those. Weld them, delete that one. Yeah, at the top here it doesn't exactly look solid yet. That's better. Well, not exactly. There we go. Cap. Okay, that front part looks almost okay. I still have the those tube parts. And tweak that a little bit more. Those tube parts will be tricky because I also want to keep them as one mesh, and wow, that's going to be hard. Well, first I need to get that little box thingy at the top on there. Extrude it. Move these so it fits. And while I'm looking at this, I'm thinking I'm already gonna have to change the box that sits around there because it's just too big and encloses the high poly too much. It needs to change. So we look at it from all angles. I'm just checking if there's not another part I'll skip to. Yeah. See, I'm a little bit tired of working on the carburetor parts, so I'm gonna work at this. I'm gonna work on this part at the back. And it's not a problem to do this. The reason I do this is just to stay interested. If a part gets boring, if I feel sick of working on it, then well, I just switch to another one. That's a more interesting challenge. I'm just not looking forward to creating those two parts on the carburetors, so I'm just working on this simple box shape here. So yeah, we prepared for that one also. It is asymmetrical, so once we get past the symmetry stage, then we'll have to fix that. So yeah, obviously, since the low poly mesh will encompass everything of the engine, I'm gonna have to create a version first with symmetry, where I will go as far as possible with modeling everything I can that the symmetry will mirror for me. And then once I have that done and it's down absolutely perfect, then I'll go to collapsing the symmetry and model the unique parts. So this part seemed interesting for me to fix now. The holes at the side for the bolts that hold the valve cover into place. I'm thinking I can't get away with just normal maps there. It's too deep, it's too big, so I'm gonna have to model it. There we go. And I'm gonna weld those together, and I'll just connect them upwards like that. Connect. Yep, that looks efficient. Of course I have big tries on the top there, but it's a flat plane, so it doesn't matter. And like I said, I really try to avoid end-gons too much, so I cut these up into tries and quads. Okay, let's see. What else do I have here that I can attack next? Probably not too much for this part, but we'll get back to the engine in the next parts also. We still have a lot of work to do, as you can obviously see. What I see so far, most of it looks pretty good. Some parts will need tweaking. Also, one thing I'm not sure of is those little push rods with springs at the front and the back. I might not model those because they might get tricky, and I won't feel like modeling them. Change the color. Alright, there we go. Maybe I want to add a symmetry on top there. And you see, we've put quite a lot of work. That was about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, which would have been 50 minutes in real time, since this is sped up. Would have been 50 minutes, and I've only managed to create this pretty blocky model while I worked really focused. So as you can see, difficult part. Symmetry, that's looking a lot better already. Alright, I think that's it for this part, and we'll get back to the engine in the next part of the video.